I asked Jill, what do you want me to talk about tonight? She said, look, don't try to be witty or clever or insightful, just be yourself. So I'll give that a go. I can't resist this. I wasn't going to tell a joke, but I see that Scott's son's here. So, when you're in this game and you write books, people, I was talking to Scott. I said to him beforehand, what do you want people to be saying about you in 100 years? Because, when you write books, you like to think that someone might read your books and say something. And so before the show tonight, Scott said to me, Jim, 100 years from now, what I'd like people to be saying about me is something along the lines of, isn't it remarkable that he's still sexually active? That is a Bill Bryson joke, and he told that when he was here. It was such a fantastic joke. Sometime in 2016, Anthony called me and said, do you want to edit a book on making Australia right, as in politically right? And so he ended up talking me into it. And so we did the first book, Making Australia Right. And I'm a pretty laissez-faire guy. So we, lined up some good writers. And I just say, here's how many words you have. Try to get mostly people on the right, but not all. And they wrote a book. And so then sometime in 2019, I got a call from Peter Kurti saying, Anthony's got in touch with me and we think we might do a follow-up book. So this one's Keeping Australia Right. And so this is pre-COVID. And so Peter talked me into it, and we did the same sort of thing. We got some good speakers, we got Scott, we got a bunch of people, and we gave them the outline, which is really, would you write on this topic? And here's how many words you have. And that was about it. That's pretty much the level of constraints. Now, I have to say that in 2019, I was pretty disaffected with the right of center political parties. Had we known that everything would get frozen, because really the book got finished last year and we haven't been able to do a launch, but had we known that things were going to be so precipitously bad since then, I think it would have been more like not keeping Australia right, would have been more like keeping Australia sort of hard, hoping to move to the hard left. We're so far left. I will just go off topic here and just say that I did a little article for an American outlet called Law and Liberty last week on the incredible idiocy of this government. This government in the last, since it was elected, has become the biggest spending. I personally believe that had Labour won the last election, we would be better off, because we would have had a right of centre opposition that would have made it harder to do some of these things. So we have become the biggest spending government in Australia's history. Now, I don't know that anyone who voted for coalition thought that was going to happen in 2019. And there have been more inroads on civil liberties and freedoms of any peacetime government. It comes very close to wartime governments, not quite. It's also been one of the most, maybe the worst thing of all is that what we have seen with Josh Frydenberg, and this isn't just in Australia, most jurisdictions, Sweden has been exemplary. A center-left Swedish government has stood up against the mania, and Ron DeSantis in Florida has, after 5 months of being called a grandmother killer, he's now the most popular governor in the U.S. But he was brutalized. But what we have seen is one of the most immoral things. We have seen this sort of intergenerational theft on an incredible level. So when you are watching this massive stimulatory fiscal policy, that really is just borrowing from the future to give to the present. That is all it is. And another way of putting that is you're borrowing from your grandkids and your children, thank you, to give to oldies like us. And then the stimulatory monetary policy is taking money from people without assets and giving it to people with assets. Another way of putting that is you're taking money from the poor and giving it to the rich. More billionaires have been created during COVID than in any other calendar year. If you're big companies, I'm a right of center guy. I can only imagine what a socialist would be saying about this. It's a disgrace on every front. And that's leaving aside the non-monetary things like, some people say it's not all that important, but it is important. Kids don't get to go to their graduating high school formal. That's a pretty important thing. The universities are pretending that Zoom classes are worth anything. Zero. Rhymes with the 5th Roman emperor, the pyromaniac. Zero. That's how useless it is. And so across the board, we are living through a terrible time, and it's been presided over by a coalition government. This is incredible. The emergency power bit was mentioned as well. So that part is just shocking. And in Australia, we've had very few deaths, there's no doubt about it. But one of the reasons the politicians don't like Sweden is because they stood up against the sort of capitulation that went down. I mean, I don't know how many of you know, but in November 2019, the 20-year standing WHO policy was do not lock down no matter what. That was the science. And whenever one tells you the science, they don't really understand science. I used to teach a bit of philosophy of science. Science is a sort of movable feast. It's always open to questioning, right? The most certain scientific fact that we ever came up with is Newtonian physics. It was rock solid for 200 plus years. And then Einstein showed not actually right at the subatomic level, right? Or people say for many years the entire medical community thought that ulcers came from stress. An Australian idiosyncratic guy said, no, it's a bacterial infection, right? So you never know if you're going to get it right or wrong. And anyone who says you can't question something because of the science is a moron. Now, usually the establishment view is quite correct, but not always. And when you see things like the Lancet refusing to publish articles about where the virus emanated, that's really shocking. And it undermines people's confidence in a lot of things. And I really, personally, what's really hit me as an expat Canadian here for 16 years is, at the end of the day, the most disappointing thing is the sheep-like, ovine, pathetic behavior of your average Australian. I am sick of walking around UQ with mask-wearing people everywhere, the virtue signaling. They don't even know that almost no study shows any benefit to masks. If you are wearing the $200 mask and you switch it out every 25 minutes, okay. Anybody doing that? I don't think so. And if you're wearing the exact same mask without washing it, it's actually harmful. And masks, these viruses are so small, they blast through all the holes in a mask. They don't even notice it's there. So, I wear a mask when it's really, really important, like I have to buy wine. I'm not a zealot about these things, If I need alcohol, I'm wearing it. But that's about the level. You don't ever want to be a complete zealot in life. So this has been an appalling government, in my view. And, Boris has been awful, but he makes Morrison look bad. I mean, he's been better than Morrison. We all predicted, or many of us predicted early on, that there's no way out. That they've got themselves in a situation where they're now into an eradication strategy. Does anybody know how many viruses in the history of sort of recorded human history have been eradicated? No. One. Smallpox, there we go. And that is a very unique set of circumstances. But no transmitted by air virus has ever been eradicated. It won't be eradicated. When they tell you that the variants are stronger, almost all viruses get weaker over time. Weaker and more transmissible. It's just evolution. It's a better strategy. Viruses don't think, but if we can personify a virus, it's a better strategy to make lots of people sick but don't kill them. Like, what's the point of killing the host, right? And so they tend, again, talking in statistical, they tend to get weaker. So it's been a very disappointing sort of last year for me, and I'm especially disappointed by, these Australians who bill themselves as sort of Crocodile Dundee types have all been pathetic. We as a group of voters have been pathetic. You get the politicians you deserve, and we deserve these morons in Canberra. In Britain, say what you will, 53 Tory MPs voted against lockdown. They voted against their own party. They voted against Boris. They voted against the emergency powers. We can't even get one. Not a single coalition, national, we have to watch the Tim Wilsons and the James Patterson come out of the IPA. I'm a libertarian, and they give these rousing speeches, and they do nothing. So that's pretty incredibly disappointing.
Craig Kelly,
yeah, he was pretty good. I mean, I think he should have left the Liberal Party myself, but it turns out that there's a lot of studies on ivermectin that show it's quite effective. So we have a prime minister who seems to be almost wholly motivated by focus groups. So, you know, the only way to seem to change this is to somehow get into one of the focus groups. I don't know how, sign up, please. But the only time he's not driven by focus groups is when some allegation on the ABC comes out, and then he just, you know, yells at the ivermectin MP, Craig Kelly, or he decides that based on one Brereton report, he's going to impugn our military. Like, I would have thought, you know, due process might come in here somewhere. He doesn't do that either. He makes ridiculous statements about free speech never having created a job. He doesn't understand the entire sort of Reformation world onwards, the Enlightenment. In fact, free speech has created loads of jobs, but even if it didn't, it's a principled matter anyway. So he's been a ginormous disappointment. So I'm pretty sure we would not have written the same book, but it's still a pretty good sort of overview of all of the areas. So if you put COVID aside, and we gave the authors a chance to mention a bit about COVID, but we got Allan Moran on energy. He is superb. I don't know if you see him on various sites, but you know, he knows more about the sort of idiocies of the renewable rent-seeking lobby than just about anyone. Andrew Stone has a great chapter on immigration, and if the name Stone rings a bell and you think, could he be the son of John Stone, one of the great civil servants? Yes, he is. He's also a great economist. My dad, by the way, was a senior civil servant in Ontario, the provincial government, like he was a deputy minister. He would not be hireable today anywhere in Australia. I mean, he would have been fired on day 2 because he just said what he thought. He worked for 3 different, my dad worked for conservative governments, Liberal, which in Canada means sort of center-left, and what in Canada was an even further left government, the NDP. And you know, today he would have never hired anybody except on merit, so he would have been gone. Robert Carling does the economics. We got a whole cross-section of really good people, and I think you'll enjoy the book. Every chapter's short, so I encourage you to, and not just buy it because you like the book, but buy it to support one of the great entrepreneurial small publishing houses. I could go on, but you know what I think is better is if we just throw this open to a question. Let me finish this way. It's a joke I used to tell about the Green Party. But these days, if I had a chance, I'd probably tell it about the Liberal Party. And so I'll shorten it. But you know, one day Scott is walking down the beach and stumbles on this sort of old, sort of bottle-like thing, and he bends over and rubs it, and Jeannie comes out, and she says, "You get 3 wishes, but I'm a very special sort of genie. So for every wish you make, Scott, you get 1 of it, and every Green Party member in Australia gets 2 of it. 2. So think very carefully." And so Scott says, "Well, for my first wish, I'd like $1 million. So she blinks her eyes. She says, "You have $1 million. Every member of the Green Party in Australia now has $2 million. What's your second wish?" Scott goes, "I've always been fond of a sort of spiffy German sports car." So she blinks her eyes. "There's 1 in your parking lot, 1 in your driveway. Every Green Party member has 2 Maseratis, and have you got a third and final wish?" And Scott goes, "Well, you know, I've been thinking about it for a while, and I've always wanted to donate a kidney."